Marketing is a podcast for business owners and leaders, produced by my dad, Steve Davis, and his colleague at Talked About Marketing, David Olney, in which they explore marketing through the lens of their own 4 Ps: person, principles, problems, and perspicacity. Yes, you heard that correctly. Apart from their love of words, they really love helping people. So they hope this podcast will become a trusted companion on your journey in business.
People use different methods of working out what they do in a certain situation in life. And I know in America there are a lot of bumper stickers from the Bible Belt, what would Jesus do, etc. Our title for this episode is What Would Arnold Schwarzenegger Do? And David, I think you're going to take up the mantle later in this episode to perhaps suggest what he would say.
I am, but for the moment what I have to say is, we're going to terminate it.
Before we've even begun.
Sorry, had to. It's the coolest sci-fi movie ever.
Our 4 Ps. Number 1, person. The aim of life is self-development, to realise one's nature perfectly. That is what each of us is here for. Oscar Wilde.
David, you've heard the saying that you pick your battles.
Indeed. And I tried to do so, otherwise I'd get in far too many.
Well, in the person segment, I've got a sort of a riff on that in relation to when you're engaged in an argument or a persuasive conversation with someone and things are stuck. It's not so, yes, on one hand, you pick your battles. Is this a conversation worth having? And I must say, contentious topics, political topics, I learned many years ago, I don't even start these or partake in them in any social media forum because they have been geared up, as we've talked about often. All those boffins want are engagement. So they want hatred and drive-by insulting because that keeps people glued to the thing. And I find no satisfaction. It's just not worth it. There's no room for nuance. That said, so there's one argument here is, do you get involved in this argument or not? You pick your battle. But the other thing is, you can pick your mode of conversation. And this I've gleaned from the book How Minds Change by David McRaney. Not firsthand, that's actually on my list. I'm going to be reading that over summer. But listening to David's podcast, which Lisa Kennewell put us onto, it's called You Are Not So Smart. He actually did a special episode where he got himself interviewed about the book he wrote, How Minds Change. And there's a really interesting section in this interview that I want to share with us in this segment because it might come in handy for us in the cut and thrust of discussions and arguments with people either close to us or business clients, whatever it might be. And here it is. Whenever we're confronted by something we disagree with, so if, David, you say something, can you say something to me that I would disagree with?
South Australian Shiraz tastes like shoe polish.
Right. Straight away, my mind throws up reactants, they're called, because I just don't agree with you whatsoever because what you're saying is against what I hold true. So I will come up with reasons why that's wrong. Just shoot from the hip. One, of course, I do know that you like Pinot Noir, so that bars you from having anything sensible to say about wine.
I only made the comment I made to get you wound up because you asked me to. And shoe polish, for whatever reason, was the first word that popped in my head that I thought would elicit the appropriate response.
So here's the thing. These reactants, instantly, it's like...
are very real.
They're very real. We send out to defend our position. However, if we hear something we like, yep, we just let it go through to the keeper. All is good here, nothing to say. And so David makes the point, not David Olney, but
Mr.
David McRaney, that often what's happening here is lazy thinking and or a debate style. So reactive thinking happens when you're on guard because your position is being challenged. But the bit that came out in this conversation, drawn from his book, is when he puts something forward that you want to look out for. You want to grab the conversation by the scruff of the neck, gently, and shape it in a way that makes your opponent, in inverted commas, stop and go, well, because you've posed a question to get them to reflect on what they're saying, and that moment, the well, that little comment is the sign that we're about to have a proper reflective conversation. Let's have a listen to this quote.
In all these conversation techniques, you open up with trying to prevent reactance, but that's something that has to do with two people. And then you ask for a claim, or you talk about the issue, and you ask on a scale from 0 to 10. If it's a fact-based claim, you say, how certain are you from 0 to 10? How confident are you that this is true or this is false? And if it's an attitude-based issue, you say from 0 to 10, like, how strongly do you feel about it? Like 10 would be, and you imagine some extreme scenario, and 0, you imagine some other extreme scenario. The thing that makes that work is the next question is, why does that number feel right to you? And then moving off of that, like, why not this number, why not this number? So you can imagine if you're working on yourself, it could be very simple. Like, how do you feel about Top Gun Maverick, right? Like you could say, I don't know, I really liked it. I think I'd give it like an 8. Okay. And then you're talking to yourself, like, why an 8? It's a different frame. The frame of, did I like it? Yes or no. And then the frame of, I'd give it an 8. That's feels like I've answered the question. But then when I ask, well, why did I give it an 8?
Why not a 7?
Why not a 7? Why not a 6? And you can feel yourself spooling out from there. If you ask this of another person, there's that moment where people go, well, that well is a hugely powerful thing that's taking place in the other person. They are completely shifting out of one way of making sense of the world to another. And I guess when they step out of those clothes into the others, there's an well moment that has to take place. So in the end, the person is changing their own mind. They are doing it to themselves. And they start to produce these counter arguments so often for the position that they just expressed. You've probably done this. I've seen people do this where you like, they walk out of a play or something. Like, what'd you think of it? And like, oh, I loved it. It was great. And like, what'd you like about it? And they're like, oh, it was good. I like when they did this. I mean, there was some problems with that. And there was, and then by the end of it, they'll say like, well, it wasn't that great, but it was pretty good. If you had like a little YouTube slider for that person, you could go all the way to the beginning and go, it was great. And then blah, 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 to the end. It wasn't that good. What? It was great. It wasn't that good. It was great. It wasn't that good.
See, I was quite taken by this, especially, I mean, I still haven't seen Top Gun Maverick yet, but to say, what do you think of it? 8 out of 10. Well, why not 10? Or why not 6? What held you back? What made you go higher than 6? Because the point being, you go, well, and you work out the reasons either positively or negatively to build from the score that you gave. And the thing I like, David, is he said, we can do this with ourselves, ask ourselves, or why did we give that 8? Or we can use that with someone else. This is a really clever technique.
It's a great technique. And that's the thing with David McRaney. His first book, You Are Not So Smart, actually put him in a pretty depressed mental state because he realized we're full of so many biases. He actually took so much agency away from himself and other humans by showing all the things we can't get right. So when he came to write his most recent book, he was so convinced, I'm going to find what makes it possible for people to grow and change. And it's not just that he found good answers, but he's worked so hard to show how everyone can use them. So it's not like he's gone, these tools are one-offs and you can only use them in particular circumstances. No, he's gone for tools you can use to change how you think, how you answer questions, and change how you converse with other people, and how you shape conversations more positively.
It's really interesting. I'm off to a board meeting this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to a conversation where I can apply this there, just as not to try and dismantle anything, not to try and win any cheap points. I think I've got a sensitivity to when people are just glancing past things and just mouthing a position that they've held either directly or they've picked it up from someone else. And I just would love to be that sort of agent for myself as well as for others to try and elicit the, well, because I think it's just such a golden thing that's important for all of us. And as for the person segment, I invite everyone to challenge yourself on those situations, to put you through this test. Ask yourself, okay, how important is this to me right now? Well, 7 out of 10. What would make it 10 out of 10? Or why is it not? Or why is it 5? Or why wouldn't you have done 5? Because you're going to start coming up with arguments either way. Any final thoughts on this, David?
Yeah, it reminds me of 2 ancient phrases for questioning your own thoughts. And I can't remember now what culture they come out of. I have a sneaking suspicion it might have been out of the Mayan culture. But any time a phrase pops into your head, this ancient culture suggested asking 2 questions. Are my thoughts useful? And how do my thoughts behave?
Oh, the first one is really obvious, but the second one's intriguing.
Is powerful. And, if you say something like, oh, South Australian Shiraz tastes like shoe polish, is that useful? Or is it for antagonising people? Mm-hmm. Was antagonising people your aim? If it was, fine. But if it wasn't, that's not very useful. And if you ask the same question, how do my thoughts behave? Well, that thought is deliberately provocative to a friend. Why am I doing that?
That's an interesting thing. So there you go, a value-added extra set of questions to go with what David McRaney said. And if you do read the book, How Minds Change, obviously David and I would love to hear what you think through our email or however you'd like to contact us, because I'm sure it's going to make an appearance in Series 4.
Our 4 Ps. Number 2, principles. You can never be overdressed or overeducated. Oscar Wilde.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Hasta la vista, Steve.
You probably have a much better Arnold Schwarzenegger voice at the moment because you're
I'm more of a Central European.
You're immersed in listening to him reading his book. And what's the book's called Be Useful, 7 Tools for Life.
That's the one.
David, either as yourself or as Arnold, can you take us through, because see, believe, achieve is a well-known saying, but you and Arnold have inserted an explain there. Can you please explain?
Arnie's book has got so much amazing stuff in it. And if you can use all of it, you're probably going to end up being a superstar overachiever like Arnold Schwarzenegger. My suggestion is listen or read the book and try and get 1 or 2 things to take away that you can actually apply every day, because that's still a big win. And the bit that stuck with me most when he used the example of see, believe, achieve, which is a very old, very common phrase in self-help. That if you can have the vision of it and you can believe you can achieve it, then you will achieve it. And Arnie makes the point, no, that's not actually the case. Between the see, believe, and achieve, you need to add explain. It needs to be see, believe, explain, and achieve. Because if you can't explain your vision to yourself and others, well, how are you going to know that it's worth committing to? How are you going to see all the nuances, the details, the stages? How are you going to break it down into achievable goals? How are you going to show people that you really understand what you're trying to do? How are you going to convince them that they might want to work with you and that they can trust you to lead on this project? So the explanation is nearly as important as the vision. The vision's great, but that's all in your head. The explanation is where you take a brilliant idea or a hypothesis out of your head and put it in the world in a way that you can reflect on and other people can reflect on, and you can both benefit and maybe get colleagues and supporters to help you get towards your goal. It's just adding explain makes the original adage so much better.
Let's have a little snippet of him.
Now, when I was training the Special Olympians, I remember I had around 10 young fellows standing there. And the idea was to start with the bench press. And they have kind of an empty bar put above them. And that empty bar they grip, and then they feel kind of the gravity of the bar pulling down. And I had them just kind of like do the bench press, go all the way down with the bar to the chest, and then all the way up again. The idea there was to do kind of like 10 reps, and then have them get up, and then the next one lies down and does his 10 reps. And then later on, we put some 10-pound plates on each side to increase the weight. And so there was one guy that laid down on a bench, and he all of a sudden, when they put the bar above his chest, and he gripped his hands around the bar, all of a sudden he started freaking out, and he started screaming really loud, and he jumped up. I grabbed the bar quickly, and then I kind of put him at ease. I said, it's okay. It's okay. I said, you may be a little bit afraid. Why don't you just stand right next to me here, and then you just help me count out the reps for the others. What do you say about that, huh? And he said right away, yes, that would be a great idea. And then, of course, I had the other ones lie down and do the repetitions, and he counted it out for them. And it was like then eventually in the end, I said to him, I said, do you want to try again? And then he said, yes. So he laid down on the bar. No, wrong. He laid down on the bench. They put the bar above his chest, and he started bench pressing it. He started pressing it up and down and up and down and up and down, and he did 10 reps. So I said to him, I said, don't put the bar down. Do you want me to put some extra weights on it? And he said, yes, I would like to try that, yes. Let me see if I can do it. And I put on 10-pound plates, and then he did another 10 reps. Then I put another 10-pound plates on it on each side, and then he did another 4 reps. Then put on another 10-pound plates on, and he did another 4 reps. And this, within a short period of time, this guy gained confidence and strength all at the same time, within a short period of time. So anyway, this was a great story. It made me feel so good, and I said to myself, wait a minute, I didn't even make any money on this. This was not a career builder at all. Why am I so happy? And I realized I was happy because I did something for someone else. It had nothing to do with me.
The other thing I found in a lot of Arnold's work is he's always also on about not listening to naysayers. And I wonder if that works well with this see, believe, explain, achieve, because perhaps what gives naysayers room for their seeds of doubt to grow is when you can't enunciate clearly what it is you're trying to achieve, which gives them wriggle room. Maybe they work together on the same side or different side of the same coin.
I think that's absolutely true. And, he makes the point in the book that here he was, this young guy with tons of muscles and terrible English and a thick accent, going to community college, training twice a day, working as a bricklayer in the middle of the day, just being busy and everywhere. And really, no one knew what to make of him. So his ability to explain was critical, because otherwise people would just look and go, he's weird. Why should I listen? But the more he explained, they went, no. He's motivated and he's thoughtful and he's trying really hard, and that's a good idea, and he's got a plan. So explanation is a great way to help people get past their first gut reaction. And in Arnie's case, it was that he was a muscle-bound weirdo. I think I learnt to do a similar thing with him with explanation, nowhere near as effectively as him, because I haven't made my $1 zillion like he has, of getting people past me being blind, going, well, okay, here's the thing I want to do, and it's got nothing to do with me being blind, and I'm going to explain to you what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're going to do it, how we will address any issues as they come up. And it's amazing how well throughout my life a good explanation has won people over. But I never I never thought about sticking it in this adage the way Arnie did, and that it fits so well and really helps turn a kind of twee bit of self-help into an actual, tangible, usable tool.
Let's make it even less twee. Just summarize it in the voice of Arnold.
This is going to be difficult. You have to see, you have to believe, you have to explain, and then you have to achieve. Because if you can't explain, then you don't know what you believe. And if you can't explain, then how are you going to achieve it? And if you don't believe, how is anyone else going to believe in you? No, that was belief twice. Oh, I'm lost. Sorry, it's too hard doing Arnie for that long.
One win to the naysayers.
Our 4 Ps. Number 3, problems. I asked the question for the best reason possible. Simple curiosity. Oscar Wilde.
In the problems segment or the mailbag segment, we've got one that is a question. Well, it was posed by you, David, not so much as a question, but it's a really important thing that would be useful in a short, helpful segment. And it's to update or not update. And it was triggered by the impending, at the time, release of the latest operating system for the iPhone, the iOS 17. What made that top of mind for you?
This is something that's always an issue for me, because even when there is amazing new features in the major iOS update every year, there may be nothing in there that makes the phone more accessible, and the new features may actually, for a short period of time, undo or damage the level of accessibility that the iPhone has. So whereas the general public are often looking at all the fun things they get, I'm normally having to assess it from what functionality as a tool might I lose if I upgrade too early. So I'm always looking at this from a function over form perspective, which is, I think, where people started with should I upgrade or shouldn't I, rather than how excited I am about the new features. So it really has changed over time how we think about this and what kind of discussions people have about whether to update or not to update.
So what's your rule of thumb? Now, I've got a rule of thumb I use, which I'll share in a moment, but what's your rule of thumb when there's an update coming for maybe a computer program, operating system, or a smartphone?
I need to get at least one feature that will benefit me, and I need to get at least one major bug fix. If I don't, wait for the 0.1 version of whatever the update is. So, with iOS, I historically don't go when it's, say, 17, I go when it's 17.1. This time I went at 17 because there was a feature that was very useful, and there was a major bug fix for voiceover users like me to make accessibility better. Okay,
so there's your rationale. And mine has been, in the early days, yes, it was a wild west when an update came, because for all sorts of reasons, different things could work better or worse, and it was just a slot machine. You didn't know what you're going to get. These days, I must say, most of the bigger companies are pretty darn good. So I do err on the side of updating, but I do take your point. If you can, certainly waiting for one iteration is good. But the thing is, we all need to move with them, because there will be some degree of security that comes with the latest version that we just need to stop those bad people from compromising our systems. So yes, eyes open, probably not as scary as it used to be, and as David explained, some particular nuance for some particular users.
Our 4 Ps. Number 4. Perspicacity. The one duty we owe to history is to rewrite it. Oscar Wilde.
In the perspicacity segment, we are almost done for this season. We've got one more episode next fortnight for episode 9, but we've been going through the book You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar by David Sandler. Amazing man who understands the world of sales and put together the Sandler selling system. He's got a whole organisation that still works around the world doing this, but we love this book. We've been working through the Sandler submarine, where he broke down the sales process into 7 stages, and they are bonding and rapport, upfront contract, pain, budget, decision, fulfillment, which we talked about last episode, and now we're at the last point of the submarine before we do a big summary next episode, and this is called the post-sell. David, how do you describe the post-sell stage?
I think I'm going to start in describing the post-sell with where I ended last episode, and that is to say there is a very big difference selling to someone versus helping someone solve their problems and helping them achieve their goals. And the post-sell from a Sandler perspective is really you confirming that now someone has agreed to sign the contract, or perhaps even signed the contract. This is your time to confirm to them that this wasn't just about getting money out of somebody, that it was genuinely about, we are here to help you improve that situation and reach that goal. And by sticking around after you've got the contract signed, rather than running out the door screaming yippee, you show that it wasn't just getting the deal that's important, but that it's working together, that is going to continue to be important moving forward. So taking the time to talk to the prospective client who's now a client and go, okay, this is a pretty big thing you've done that's going to have a big impact on your business. It will get you closer to achieving your goals. What butterflies are you feeling? Let's spend 10 minutes and talk about those butterflies and see how many of them, I can calm down now, or how many of them I can explain to you when they will be resolved over the next month as we begin to implement. Take the time to really help the now client to understand you are here to help them achieve goals. You aren't just here to get money and run. Because if you suddenly run out the door, you potentially are undoing all the rapport. You're undoing the upfront contract. You're undoing the quality way you did the presentation as a fulfillment of all the Sandler steps up until that point. To run at the moment of getting the check is to show, well, all of that was just a way to manipulate you into spending money. And you don't want to do that after working so hard to build the beginning of a good working relationship.
And that was a bit in reading the book or listening to the book that surprised me, is he'd done all this work and you're feeling the satisfaction, and he's saying he wants to spend this time to court the opportunity of them backing out, because he'd rather have them back out face to face than get back to the office, go yippee, ring the bell, to then get the message that night or over the weekend to say, no, we've changed our mind. Which is that old adage that a red light is less expensive if you face it right now than if it comes further down the road. Wow.
Whereas if you spend that time and help someone work through any concerns they still have, you've got a chance of going forward and maybe having to modify how the next phase of the deal happens, the next phase of the implementation happens. But by spending that time, you're showing the commitment to the person and the company rather than to just, my numbers are good for the month, I get a bonus.
On that note, I think we're not quite there at a bonus yet. I think we'll give ourselves a bonus of a moment to exhale together at the end of episode 9. But right now, the work continues, David. Get back into the office.
I will.
And if I hear one more Arnold Schwarzenegger quote, I'll be very happy. What can you take us out with?
Hasta la vista, listener.
Thank you for listening to Talking About Marketing. If you enjoyed it, please leave a rating or a review in your favourite podcast app. And if you found it helpful, please share it with others. Steve and David always welcome your comments and questions, so send them to podcast@talkedaboutmarketing.com. And finally, the last word to Oscar Wilde. There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about.